Some love stories do not end when the marriage ends. They keep living quietly in old photographs and songs and phone calls made too late, in names nobody says too often, and sometimes in the final pages of a will. For Lee Majors, the world always remembered the strength. The man who played Steve Austin in The $6 Million Man. The man rebuilt stronger, faster, almost impossible to destroy. The man who ran across television screens in slow motion while millions of children copied him in playgrounds. But off-screen, Lee Majors lived with a wound no bionic strength could fix. A woman. A marriage. A friend. And one decision that looked small at the time, but changed the rest of his life. At 87, when people look back at Lee Majors, they see a television legend with 3 hit shows across 3 different decades. But behind that career is a quieter story. A boy who lost both parents before he was old enough to understand the word orphan. A young man who had his sports dream taken from him. An actor who fought his way into Hollywood without connections, and a husband who helped the woman he loved become one of the most desired faces on earth, only to watch that same fame pull her away from him. That woman was Farrah Fawcett. And the painful truth is this: Lee Majors did not lose Farrah in one dramatic moment. He lost her slowly. First to fame, then to distance, then to another man, and yet, decades later, Farrah left behind one final detail that made people wonder if Lee had been right all along. Maybe she never completely left him either. Before he was Lee Majors, he was Harvey Lee Yeary. He was born in Michigan in 1939, but his childhood was marked by loss almost before it began. His father died before Lee was born. His mother died when he was still a toddler. By the age of 2, the boy who would one day become one of television's strongest men had already lost the 2 people who were supposed to protect him first. He was raised in Kentucky by relatives who gave him a home, discipline, and a chance. But childhood loss does something permanent. Even when a person grows strong, something inside them learns that love can disappear without warning. Maybe that is why Lee Majors always carried a certain quietness. He did not seem like an actor who needed to explain every emotion. He held things in. He worked. He endured. He moved forward. Football became his first dream. Acting was not the original plan. He was athletic, disciplined, and serious. But a back injury ended that future before it could fully begin. That could have broken him. Instead, it redirected him. He moved toward acting, and in the mid-1960s, he landed the role of Heath Barkley in The Big Valley, beating out hundreds of other young actors. That role changed everything. He found himself working with Barbara Stanwyck, one of the true professionals of old Hollywood. She taught him the rules that stayed with him for life: show up, know the lines, hit the mark, respect the work. Lee absorbed that code. He did not become the loudest man in Hollywood. He became dependable. A working actor. A man who understood that survival and entertainment required discipline, patience, and the ability to keep private pain away from public performance. But before the biggest fame arrived, Farrah arrived. The story begins almost like a movie. His agent showed him photos of young actresses. One face stopped him. Farrah Fawcett. A young woman from Texas with beauty so immediate that it did not need explaining. She had that rare quality where the camera seemed to find her before she even tried. Lee asked to meet her. Their first date was awkward. Farrah was young, new to Hollywood, and not exactly polished in the ways the city expected, but Lee saw something beyond beauty. She was Southern. He was Southern. They understood something about each other before fame complicated everything. After the date, he sent her yellow roses. Not one. Not a careless Hollywood gesture. A gesture with warmth, charm, and intention. Farrah later remembered how deeply it affected her, and from there, The relationship grew. At first, their love had a kind of innocence that is hard to imagine now. Farrah was not yet Farrah Fawcett the icon. She was not yet the poster. Not yet Jill Monroe. Not yet the woman whose hair would define an era. She was simply Farrah, trying to find her place in Los Angeles. Lee was already further along. He had credits. He had experience. He knew the business better, and in the early years he helped her. That detail matters. Because in later retellings, Lee is often remembered only as the husband who lost her. But before he lost her, he helped build the road beneath her feet. He encouraged her. He supported her. He helped her get opportunities. He believed she had something. And he was right. They married in 1973. That same year, Lee Majors stepped into the role that would make him internationally famous. Steve Austin in The $6 Million Man. The premise was simple but unforgettable. A man nearly destroyed in an accident is rebuilt with bionic technology. He becomes stronger, faster, better, but Lee played him with restraint. Steve Austin was not just a superhero. He was a man carrying the loneliness of being changed. A man made powerful, but not necessarily free. That emotional quietness made the show work. And soon, Lee Majors became one of the biggest television stars in the world. His face was everywhere. Posters, toys, magazines, television screens across dozens of countries. But while Lee was becoming a global action icon, Farrah's own moment was approaching. And when it arrived, it was not gradual. It was explosive. In 1976, Farrah Fawcett became one of the stars of Charlie's Angels. The show itself became a phenomenon. But Farrah became something even bigger. She became the image of the 1970s. That smile, that hair, that red swimsuit poster. The poster sold millions and became one of the most famous celebrity images ever printed. And here is the painful irony. Lee Majors helped choose the photograph that turned his wife into a global fantasy. He had helped open the door. And then the world rushed in. Suddenly, Farrah did not belong only to their marriage. She belonged to television, to magazines, to teenage boys with posters on their walls, to photographers, to producers, to a public that wanted more and more of her. Fame changed the rhythm of the marriage. Not because fame always destroys love, but because fame makes love fight for space. Lee was working long days on his set. Farrah was working long days on hers. They became two famous people living separate schedules, passing through the same life like travelers in different time zones. Marriage needs ordinary hours. Dinner, quiet mornings, arguments that finish before bedtime, small routines, a shared boredom, a shared home. But Lee and Farrah had fame instead. And fame does not tuck anyone in at night. The distance grew. The love was still there, but love alone is not always enough when two lives are being pulled in opposite directions by an industry that feeds on attention. Lee encouraged Farrah to leave Charlie's Angels after one season and pursue more serious film roles. He wanted her to be respected as an actress, not just adored as a beauty. That decision was risky. And the industry punished her for it. There were legal battles. There were expectations. There were films that did not become what people hoped. Farrah had escaped one box only to discover that Hollywood had already built another one for her. Lee watched all of this from the painful position of a husband who had encouraged the dream, but could not control what the dream became. And then came the betrayal that made the story famous. Ryan O'Neal. He was not a stranger. He was Lee's friend. That is what made it cut deeper. Lee was away working. Farrah was alone. Ryan was around. And according to the story that followed them for decades, Lee had asked Ryan to look in on her, to take her out, to keep her company. It was the kind of request a man makes when he trusts someone. A simple favor. A small act of friendship, but sometimes life breaks open through the smallest door. Ryan and Farrah grew close. Too close. And when Lee realized what was happening, the damage had already begun. There are betrayals that make people angry. And there are betrayals that make people feel foolish. This was both. Lee had not just lost his wife to another man. He had invited that man into the space where loneliness had been waiting. That is the kind of regret that can circle a person for years. Not just, why did she leave? But, did I help it happen? When Lee spoke about the separation at the time, he did not turn it into a public war. He did not build an image as the wounded husband. He did not attack Farrah in every interview, but one line from him revealed enough. He admitted he was lonely and miserable without her. That sentence matters because it is not dramatic, it is not polished, it is not angry. It is just true. Lonely and miserable. Behind the man rebuilt with bionic strength was a husband sitting inside a very ordinary heartbreak. The divorce became final in 1982. By then, Farrah's life had moved into a long and complicated chapter with Ryan O'Neal. Lee moved on publicly, because that is what men of his generation were often expected to do. Do not collapse. Do not explain too much. Go to work. So he went to work. And, in the middle of personal heartbreak, Lee Majors created another hit. The Fall Guy. He played Colt Seavers, a Hollywood stuntman who worked as a bounty hunter. The show had action, humor, charm, and a kind of relaxed confidence that suited him perfectly. And Lee sang the theme song himself. That detail says something about him. He was not afraid to make fun of the myth. He understood the stuntman, the working man, the guy behind the glamour, maybe because that was closer to how he saw himself than the superhero image. The show ran for years and proved that Lee was not a one-role phenomenon. He had survived the Western era. He had conquered the science fiction action era. Now he was carrying an 80s action comedy series. 3 decades. 3 hits. That is rare. But career success does not erase personal ghosts. Farrah remained part of his story, even when she was no longer part of his life. He married again. He had more children. He later found long-term stability with Faith Cross. He built a life away from the most chaotic center of Hollywood. But Farrah was different. Some people are chapters. Some people are weather. They change the atmosphere of everything that follows. Farrah was weather in Lee Majors' life. Not because the marriage lasted forever. It did not. But because the love happened at the exact moment both of them were becoming legends. He knew her before the poster, before the hair became an industry, before the world decided who she was, and she knew him beyond the bionic man. Before age softened the image, before nostalgia turned him into a classic television icon. They had known each other in the vulnerable stage before full mythology. That kind of bond does not vanish easily. Then came Farrah's illness. Cancer changed the final years of her life and returned her story to something raw and human. The image of effortless beauty was replaced by the reality of pain, treatment, courage, fear, and mortality. And near the end, Lee Majors called her. It was her birthday. They spoke for around 40 minutes. Think about the weight of that call. Decades had passed. Marriage had ended. Lives had changed. Other partners had come. Public stories had hardened. But at the edge of life, the old connection was still there enough for a phone call. What do people say in a call like that? Maybe not everything. Maybe not the whole history. Maybe not the anger, the regret, the questions, the apologies that should have been said earlier. Sometimes, at the end, people do not need to solve the past. They just need to touch it gently one last time. Farrah died in 2009. Lee's public statement was brief and respectful. He called her an angel. He did not make the moment about himself. That restraint has always been part of his story. He says enough to show respect. Then he stops. But after Farrah's death, one detail emerged that changed the emotional meaning of everything. In her will, Farrah Fawcett left Lee Majors $100,000. Ryan O'Neal, the man who had been her partner for so many years after Lee, reportedly received nothing. That detail does not explain everything. It does not rewrite the whole past. It does not prove that Farrah loved Lee more. Life is too complicated for that. But it does say something. It says he still mattered. After all the years, after the divorce, after the public embarrassment, after the pain, after the separate lives. When Farrah made final decisions about what she would leave behind, Lee Majors still had a place in the document. That is not nothing. Sometimes money is not really money. Sometimes it is a message. A final acknowledgement. A quiet thank you. An apology without the word apology. A way of saying, "You were part of me, and I did not forget." Maybe that is why the story still hits people. Because everyone understands the feeling of someone who is gone, but not gone. The person you do not talk about every day, but still measure time around. The person whose name changes the room. The person you lost, but never fully removed from your heart. Lee Majors did not build his later life around bitterness. That may be the most important part. He could have. Many people would have. He could have attacked Ryan O'Neal for decades. He could have turned Farrah into a betrayal story. He could have written a revenge memoir. He could have made himself the victim every time a microphone appeared. But he did not. He kept working. He kept aging. He kept showing up. He let the silence carry what words would have cheapened. That is why people still call him a gentleman. Not because he never hurt, but because he did not turn his hurt into a weapon. And that is rare. In Hollywood, heartbreak often becomes publicity. Pain becomes a headline. Divorce becomes a marketing cycle. But Lee Majors belonged to an older code. Protect the people you loved, even after they hurt you. Say less than you could. Keep your dignity. Let time tell the parts you cannot say. And time did tell something. It told it through that phone call. Through that will. Through the fact that even after all those years, the names Lee Majors and Farrah Fawcett still belong in the same sentence. At 87, Lee Majors is not just remembered as the Bionic Man. He is remembered as a survivor of a different kind. A man who lost parents, dreams, marriages, and the woman who became the most unforgettable face of his era. And still, he did not let loss make him cruel. That is the real story. Not that he could not forget Farrah because he was stuck in the past, but because some people are part of the foundation. You move on. You remarry. You work. You laugh. You build new rooms in your life. But deep underneath, there is still one name carved into the earliest stone. For Lee Majors, that name was Farrah. She was the young woman who melted over yellow roses, the wife he helped into the spotlight, the star whose fame outgrew their marriage, the woman who left, the woman who called back through memory, the woman who spoke to him near the end, the woman who left him one final sign that the past had not been erased. And maybe that is why this story feels so powerful, because it is not only about celebrity, it is about the unfinished nature of love. Some loves end cleanly, others do not. Some become hatred, others become silence. And some become something stranger. A quiet tenderness that survives disappointment. A wound that no longer bleeds but never fully disappears. A name and a will. A phone call before goodbye. A man in his 80s still speaking carefully because the woman is gone and dignity is all that remains. Lee Majors was once introduced to the world as a man rebuilt stronger than before. But real life does not rebuild people that neatly. It leaves scars. It leaves missing parts. It leaves questions. It leaves memories that arrive when the room gets quiet, and maybe that is the truth he finally admits, not in one explosive confession, but in the shape of his whole life. He never completely forgot her. And maybe, in the end, Farrah never completely forgot him either. That does not make the story perfect. It makes it human. A young man who lost everything early became a star. A young woman from Texas became an icon. They found each other before the world took pieces of both of them. They loved. They failed. They hurt. They moved on. And decades later, at the edge of her life, the bond was still there. Quiet but visible. That is why Lee Majors' story still matters. Because behind every public legend is a private person asking the same questions everyone else asks. Did I love well? Did I lose too much? Did they remember me? Did any of it still matter? Farrah's final gesture gave Lee Majors an answer. Yes, it mattered. And sometimes, after a lifetime of silence, that is the only confession a person needs.